Like, a lot of mama too, and I love that too. Anybody in the world, I love to see do it is you.
Thank you.
At a time when music was far from what we know it as today, John Lee Hooker was one of the very few who stood out. Even though he was largely known for his undeniable talent, creating hit songs like Boogie Chillen, The Healer, and Chill Out, which earned him a Grammy Award, he was also known to be unapologetically expressive. One time, during a live interview, he looked the host in the eye and told him that even though people love the show, he needs to upgrade the show every now and then.
You have to always step up or fans will lose interest. That wasn't nothing.
Though the interviewer didn't welcome the unsolicited advice, Hooker was only saying so from a place of love. That same raw honesty extended into his love for music and the artists he admired. For Hooker, it wasn't about popularity or industry hype. It was about soul, authenticity, and the fire an artist brought to their craft. He had his favorites, artists whose work he could listen to all day, whose style inspired him, and whose spirit he deeply respected. And now, we dive into the top 7 artists John Lee Hooker loved the most, each person for a deep reason. Interestingly, he called the #1 person on this list his hero. Want to find out why? Grab a snack and sit tight to get all the tea on each person on his list. Starting with number 7, his stepfather.
My stepfather, Wilmore, I learned from him.
Yes, Hooker revealed that his love for music started with his stepfather, within their home and at the grooming stages of his life. Long before the world knew him as the blues legend, Hooker was just a young boy soaking in sounds he didn't yet understand, guided by the steady hand of his stepfather. His stepfather wasn't just a father figure. He was a musician himself, a performer who carried rhythm in his veins and passed it on to the curious child at his side. Hooker recalled how his stepfather would always take him along to the places where he performed. For a child, those evenings weren't just outings, they were lessons. Sitting quietly in the corners of small juke joints and country gatherings, Hooker learned to listen. He listened not only to the music, but to the way his stepfather commanded a room, the way people's feet tapped, and how voices rose when a song struck deep. "That was my classroom," Hooker once said. "Before I ever had a stage, I had my stepfather's shows." Inside their home, music was no less alive. His stepfather would bring out the guitar, strum through chords, and sing until the walls themselves seemed to hum. Hooker described those moments as sacred, the foundation of everything he would later become. More than the music, though, Hooker loved his stepfather because of the way he encouraged him. Instead of dismissing the boy's fascination, he nurtured it. That encouragement lit a fire in Hooker. It made him believe that he, too, had something worth saying through song. Those childhood experiences carried weight long after Hooker became famous. Even when he played to sold-out crowds or recorded tracks that would shape the future of blues, he carried in his mind the image of his stepfather playing before a small group, sweat on his brow, but passion burning at every note. To Hooker, that connection was the essence of music, and it was why he considered his stepfather not only a great artist, but one of his most loved. Hooker often said that what made his stepfather's music unforgettable wasn't polish or fame, but honesty. He played for the people, Hooker would recall, not for the money, not for the name, just for the people. Looking back, Hooker credited his stepfather with sparking the journey that gave the world some of its most timeless blues. Without him, Hooker believed, there might never have been a John Lee Hooker at all. Number 6, Muddy Waters.
Muddy Waters, a whole bunch of them.
Muddy Waters, born McKinley Morganfield, had carved out a name as the father of modern Chicago blues during his lifetime. With songs like Hoochie Coochie Man and Mannish Boy, his music didn't just echo through smoky clubs, it rattled the very foundation of American music. For Hooker, watching Muddy rise from the Mississippi Delta to international fame was proof that the blues, their music, their voice, could not be ignored. It was hugely inspiring. Hooker loved Muddy for his boldness. At a time when many artists softened their sound to appeal to wider audiences, Muddy refused to dilute his music. Hooker once said, "Muddy played it loud and proud, and that told me we never had to hide who we are." That kind of defiance struck a chord with him. Their paths often crossed, both as peers and as collaborators, and Hooker remembered those moments with reverence. Sharing a stage with Muddy was, as he described it, like standing beside a storm. The sheer power of Muddy's voice, the swagger in his guitar riffs, and the way he could command a room full of strangers left Hooker in awe. He admitted that even though he had his own unique style, there were nights when he would stand back, listen to Muddy play, and feel like a student again. What also drew Hooker to Muddy Waters was the sense of brotherhood. Both men had grown up in the South, both had endured poverty, and both knew what it meant to struggle as black musicians in a world stacked against them. Muddy's success wasn't just personal, it was communal. Every door Muddy kicked open in Chicago or beyond was a door that made it easier for artists like him to step through. That's not all. There was also a personal warmth in their relationship. Hooker recalled backstage conversations where Muddy would laugh, joke, and share stories as though they were two old friends rather than global icons. When asked late in his life why Muddy Waters remained one of his favorite artists, Hooker didn't hesitate. He explained that Muddy represented strength, pride, and authenticity. He was proof that the blues wasn't just survival music, it was triumph, power, and joy. For Hooker, loving Muddy Waters was about more than admiring his music. It was about respecting a man who turned pain into power, who stood tall when the world tried to cut him down, and who showed that the blues wasn't just music, it was life itself. That brings us to number 5, Howlin' Wolf. Born Chester Arthur Burnett, Howlin' Wolf's story was one of resilience. He came out of Mississippi like Hooker, endured a childhood marked by hardship, and still rose to become one of the most commanding figures in blues history. Songs like Smokestack Lightning and Spoonful didn't just entertain, they electrified audiences. For Hooker, that grit was irresistible. He admired Wolf not only for his talent, but for the way he turned struggle into strength. Wolf sang like the earth itself was talking, Hooker once said, and he meant it. Hooker loved the way Wolf performed. Unlike many blues artists who sat with a guitar and let the music simmer, Wolf attacked the stage with ferocity. He prowled, he growled, he commanded every inch of the room. At 6'6" and nearly 300 pounds, he was already an intimidating figure, but it was his passion that made him unforgettable. Hooker recalled nights when Wolf's performance left audiences stunned, unable to move, as though they had witnessed something sacred. That raw fire was something Hooker deeply respected. Their paths crossed during blues circuits, and Hooker remembered how Wolf carried himself off stage with the same larger-than-life energy. He wasn't a man to whisper or play it small. Everything Wolf did was bold, from the way he laughed to the way he spoke his mind. For Hooker, that honesty was part of what made him one of his most loved artists. There were no masks with Wolf. What you saw and heard was exactly what he was. Hooker also admired Wolf's loyalty to the roots of the blues. Even as the music evolved and labels pushed for more commercial sounds, Wolf never strayed far from the Delta traditions that shaped him. His slide guitar riffs and guttural voice were steeped in the soil of Mississippi. Hooker saw in him a mirror of his own devotion to authenticity. Neither man was interested in chasing trends. They were interested in telling the truth through their music. One story Hooker often shared was how Wolf treated younger musicians. Despite his intimidating presence, Wolf was known to mentor and encourage rising blues artists, reminding them that the music had to come from the heart. Hooker recalled watching him backstage, offering advice to young guitarists, showing them riffs, and reminding them not to let the industry strip away their soul. That generosity stuck with Hooker and deepened his respect for Wolf. Wolf wasn't polished, he wasn't delicate, and that was exactly why Hooker loved him. He was proof that the blues could be wild and rough and still pierce the soul. Speaking of the piercing, here's one artist who shattered Hooker's expectations. Number 4, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Talented, bold, and destined for greatness, that was how John Lee Hooker described Stevie Ray Vaughan the first time they met. Hooker was no stranger to musicians with promise, but when he crossed paths with Vaughan in Texas, he saw something rare, something electric. Vaughan's playing like fire. His guitar screamed, cried, and whispered all in the same breath. Hooker, a master of the blues himself, immediately recognized that Vaughan wasn't just good, he was the future. Hooker hyped him to others as the greatest blues singer in the making, a young man whose sound carried the weight of tradition, but also the freshness of a new era. Hooker became not just a fan, but a believer. Vaughan's performances left him in awe. He watched the way Vaughan poured his soul into every note, as if the guitar was not an instrument, but an extension of his very being. Hooker admired the fact that Vaughan carried the blues into the modern age without ever letting it lose its authenticity. But sadly, that dream ended abruptly in 1990. When news broke that Vaughn had died in a tragic helicopter crash at just 35, Hooker was devastated. His expectations, his hope for the young musician to carry the torch forward, were shattered in a single night. Hooker spoke of the loss with heavy sorrow, admitting that it felt like the entire blues community had been robbed of a future legend. "I thought he would take it further than any of us," he once said, his voice filled with grief. Hooker remembered their conversations, their shared respect, and the way Vaughn treated him with humility despite his growing fame. Unlike many young stars who became consumed by success, Vaughn remained grounded, always eager to listen and learn. That humility struck Hooker deeply. The pain of his death lingered with Hooker for years. Still, Hooker carried Vaughn's memory with reverence and love. Number 3, Eric Clapton. Hooker first became aware of Clapton's work in the late 1960s, when Clapton was making waves with Cream and Derek and the Dominoes. While many in America still underestimated the reach of blues music, Hooker noticed how Clapton was introducing the blues to audiences in Europe and beyond. Songs like Crossroads, 1968, and Layla, 1970, didn't just carry blues influences, they exploded with them. Hooker once said that Clapton had the sound of someone who lived in the blues, even though he came from a very different world. But admiration from afar turned into something unforgettable in December 1989, when the two finally shared a stage in Atlantic City, New Jersey. That night became legendary. Hooker, the elder statesman of the blues, and Clapton, the British icon who had idolized musicians like Hooker, came together in a performance that audiences would never forget. The collaboration was more than a concert. It was a passing of the torch, a symbolic union of blues past and blues future. Hooker later recalled how Clapton treated him with immense respect during that night. He was already Slowhand, the rock and blues superstar, but with Hooker, he acted as a student eager to learn. Their onstage chemistry was undeniable. Clapton's guitar wept and wailed with technical brilliance, while Hooker's deep, growling voice carried the weight of decades of lived experience. The two fed off each other's energy, proving that blues wasn't bound by age, geography, or background. It was a universal language. For Hooker, that night in 1989 stood as one of the joyful points of his later career. He shared that he was so proud that his music had inspired generations and that the legacy of the blues was in safe hands. But what's a safer hand to hold on to the legacy of a legend than his own child? Number 2, John Lee Hooker Jr. Just like Hooker, who followed the step of his stepfather, his son, John Lee Hooker Jr., carried the torch of music into another generation. But unlike the relatively straightforward journey of his father, John Lee Hooker Jr.'s story was marked by detours into some of life's darkest corners: addiction, imprisonment, and despair. For John Lee Hooker Sr., watching his son struggle was a burden that weighed heavily on his heart. Yet it made his admiration for Jr.'s eventual redemption and musical triumph all the more solid. Born into the very fabric of blues, John Lee Hooker Jr. had the kind of upbringing that almost guaranteed a career in music. He grew up surrounded by instruments, rehearsals, and the deep, soulful voice of his father echoing through their home. It seemed natural that he too would make his mark in music. In an interview, he shared that from an early age, he followed his father to gigs, soaking in the atmosphere of smoky clubs and energetic performances.
Of course, he took me everywhere, mostly everywhere he could to.
But while his father's life was largely defined by relentless work and building a career from scratch, Jr. encountered the pitfalls of fame and environment early. He admitted in later interviews that he became hooked on drugs at just 15 years old. What began as experimentation soon spiraled into full-blown addiction, derailing his life and robbing him of the bright future so many had anticipated for him. The addiction led to repeated stints in jail. He spent more than 2 decades of his life in and out of prison, battling demons that seemed far stronger than the talent he had inherited. For John Lee Hooker Sr., it was painful to witness. He knew the potential his son held, but he also knew that addiction was a fight no amount of fatherly love or musical genius could win for him. Family support played an important role in Jr.'s turnaround. After years of struggle, he finally made the decision to change his life. He went through rehabilitation, leaned on the support of loved ones, and most importantly, rediscovered music as a lifeline. In his own words, Jr. once said, "Music saved me from myself. It gave me a reason to fight, to stay alive." When John Lee Hooker Jr. released his debut album, Blues with a Vengeance, In 2004, it was a big success. Surprisingly, the album earned him a Grammy nomination, proof that not only had he found his way back, but he had done so with enough force to claim his own space in the blues world. For his father, this was more than a proud moment. And the album, he loved it. He had watched his son rise from the ashes, using the same art form that had given their family purpose for generations. Next is the artist Hooker, called his hero. Number 1, Bonnie Raitt. In the 1970s, Bonnie Raitt stood out as a fiery guitarist and soulful singer. The bond between Hooker and Raitt grew during the 1980s and 1990s when Hooker was experiencing a resurgence in his career. Many younger artists were reaching out to collaborate with him, but Raitt's involvement felt different. She didn't come to him out of obligation or to boost her own career. She came with respect, humility, and a genuine love for his craft. Hooker admired how she used her platform, not to overshadow him, but to celebrate him. One story he often recalled was how Raitt spoke up for him behind the scenes even before he could. Once, at a festival where organizers planned to cut Hooker's stage time short to make room for other bigger acts, Raitt intervened. She told them flatly that if Hooker wasn't given his full slot, she wouldn't play either. They backed down immediately. Hooker later said that moment sealed it for him. That woman had my back. Their collaboration on his Grammy-winning album, The Healer, in 1989, was another highlight. The song I'm in the Mood, which the two performed together, wasn't just a duet, it was a meeting of souls. The chemistry between them was undeniable, not in a romantic sense, but in the way two artists could create something timeless by being fully present for the music. Hooker said afterward that Raitt gave herself to the song, and he loved her for it. Raitt was a hero to Hooker thanks to her advocacy for musicians' rights. She fought for fair treatment of artists, especially older ones, and Hooker admired how she used her fame to lift others rather than only herself. For John Lee Hooker, Bonnie Raitt embodied the best of what the music industry could be. Talent rooted in integrity, fame carried with humility, and a fierce love for the blues. When he called her his hero, it wasn't hyperbole. It was the heartfelt recognition of a man who saw in her the same spirit that had fueled his own long journey through music. Let's know your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, like and share.